Welcome back to Creepshow, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of history. One of the most enduring unsolved cases in the world is the story of the Zodiac Killer, a cold-blooded murderer who taunted the police with cryptic messages and codes. But what if we told you that some high-profile names have been tied to these horrific crimes? From politicians to everyday citizens, tonight we explore the top 10 high-profile people suspected of being the Zodiac Killer. Let's dive into the suspects. Number 10. Ted Cruz. Perhaps one of the most bizarre and tongue-in-cheek suspects is none other than Texas Senator Ted Cruz. In 2013, a conspiracy theory began circulating that Cruz fit the description of the Zodiac Killer, a claim that gained surprising traction on the internet. Memes and jokes exploded, suggesting that Cruz had somehow managed to cover up his involvement by distracting the public with his political career. According to a 2016 public policy poll, 38% of voters in Florida thought there might be a connection between Ted Cruz and the Zodiac. While only 10% were convinced, a significant 28% were uncertain. Of course, there's one glaring fact that rules Cruz out entirely. He was born in 1970, 2 years after the Zodiac's killing spree began in 1968. Despite this, some conspiracy theorists weren't ready to let go of the idea. They argued that if Barack Obama's birth certificate could be questioned, why not Ted Cruz's? While most people saw this as nothing more than a humorous online trend, a small group of believers latched onto the theory, even suggesting that Donald Trump might have initiated the rumors during his campaign. Though the idea of Ted Cruz being the Zodiac Killer is firmly in the realm of satire, it's a perfect example of how the Zodiac's unsolved mystery has inspired endless speculation and wild accusations. Number 9. Arthur Leigh Allen. Arthur Leigh Allen is perhaps the most well-known and most investigated suspect in the Zodiac case. The scrutiny began on October 30th, 1966, when Allen became a prime suspect in the murder of Cherry Joe Bates. Over the years, Allen remained at the top of the suspect list, and to this day, many believe he could have been the Zodiac Killer. Allen's connection to the case was solidified when his former friend Don Chaney told police that Allen had expressed a disturbing desire to call himself Zodiac and kill random couples. This chilling confession, along with other evidence, pushed investigators to serve Allen with search warrants, making him the only Zodiac suspect to face such intense scrutiny. During the investigation, police discovered several pieces of circumstantial evidence. Allen wore a Zodiac brand watch, an eerie coincidence given the killer's signature symbol. He also possessed a bloody knife, which he claimed was used to kill chickens. And in his home, investigators found a royal typewriter similar to the one used to type up a confession letter in the Bates murder. Despite these clues, there were some significant roadblocks. Allen's handwriting didn't match the Zodiac's letters, and both his fingerprints and DNA were ruled out. Even so, Michael Mageau, one of the few survivors of a Zodiac attack, later identified Allen as the man who shot him. That identification only deepened the mystery. 1 month after Mageau's identification, police found Allen dead in his home. Though his DNA and handwriting didn't match, detectives never fully ruled out Allen as a suspect. The circumstantial evidence was strong, and many who worked the case were nearly certain he was their man. But without definitive proof, the case remains open, leaving Allen forever entangled in the Zodiac's web of mystery. Number 8. Richard Gaikowski. Richard Gaikowski is another strong contender in the mystery of the Zodiac Killer. Gaikowski worked for the Good Times newspaper in San Francisco, a publication known for promoting anti-police, pro-violence counterculture. It's the content of this newspaper, along with eerie parallels to the Zodiac's actions, that made investigators suspect Gaikowski. In January 1969, the Good Times newspaper began publishing articles with violent language, some of which appeared to contain cryptic clues. Around the same time, the Zodiac sent 3 letters to 3 different newspapers, each letter containing 1/3 of a code. The timing of these events raised suspicion. Just 5 months later, the Good Times published their own 3-part code, oddly mirroring the Zodiac's letter style. Then, to make things even more unusual, they occasionally published articles with the headline, "Zodiac Killer," without any apparent context. The randomness of this was strange enough to catch the attention of those following the case closely. In 1969, Gaikowski began publishing articles under the shortened name Gaik or Gaik. That same year, police received part of a Zodiac cipher containing the name Gaik, a suspiciously close match to Gaikowski's alias. This small detail deepened the theory that Gaikowski could have been leaving a clue to his identity. But Gaikowski didn't become a suspect until nearly 20 years after the Zodiac's reign of terror. By then, crucial evidence like fingerprints could no longer be collected without his permission or a court order. Adding to the intrigue, Gaikowski was diagnosed with a mental illness during the same period when the Zodiac went silent for 3 years. The letters from the Zodiac resumed when Gaikowski began working at a storefront theater. But despite these connections, Detective Ken Narlow, who followed Gaikowski closely, was unable to gather enough evidence for an arrest or search warrant. The Zodiac case remained unsolved, with Gaikowski lingering as a shadowy figure in its twisted legacy. Number 7. Lawrence Kane. Lawrence Kane's name has often surfaced in the hunt for the Zodiac Killer, largely due to cryptic clues hidden in the killer's famous ciphers. When people began to decrypt the codes, the name Kane emerged, leading some to believe that Lawrence Kane could be the elusive Zodiac. But the cipher wasn't the only piece of evidence linking Kane to the crimes. Pam Huckabee, the sister of Zodiac victim Darlene Ferrin, made a startling claim. She believed that Kane had been stalking her sister for months before Ferrin's tragic murder. This connection alone raised eyebrows, but the evidence didn't stop there. Another Zodiac victim who had survived an abduction attempt later identified Lawrence Kane as her attacker. In 1969, the same year the Zodiac's killings became more violent, Kane suffered significant brain damage from a car accident. His psychologist reported that Kane had lost the ability to control self-gratification, a troubling diagnosis that might explain the violent and impulsive nature of the Zodiac's crimes. Kane was arrested, but despite his detention, the Zodiac killings continued. While Kane remains a compelling suspect, no concrete proof has ever tied him definitively to the Zodiac's reign of terror, leaving yet another tantalizing piece of this unsolved puzzle. Number 6. Earl Van Best Jr. Earl Van Best Jr. stands out among Zodiac Killer suspects for one haunting reason. His face bears a striking resemblance to the infamous police sketch of the Zodiac. This connection was brought to light by Gary L. Stewart, Best's biological son, who came forward with claims that his father was, in fact, the notorious murderer. Stewart laid out his theories in his book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, hoping to bring closure to the families of the victims and solve one of history's most elusive mysteries. Stewart's investigation into his father's past revealed unsettling connections. He began by studying the cryptograms sent by the Zodiac Killer to the San Francisco Examiner. To his shock, he found the words E.V., Best, and Jr. embedded within the code. Stewart believed that such a coincidence couldn't be ignored and pushed further into the case. One of his most compelling pieces of evidence was a comparison of fingerprints. Stewart pointed out that both the Zodiac and his father had a unique diagonal scar on their fingers, linking his father to prints found at crime scenes. Additionally, Stewart hired a handwriting expert to analyze his father's signature from his marriage certificate and compare it to the Zodiac's letters. The expert reported a match, adding another layer to Stewart's claim. The final piece Stewart is waiting for? DNA results. He hopes that a match between his father's DNA and that found at Zodiac crime scenes will finally confirm his theory. While no definitive answer has come yet, Earl Van Best Jr. remains one of the most intriguing and closely scrutinized suspects in the Zodiac Killer case. Number 5. Ross Sullivan. Ross Sullivan's name has often surfaced in discussions about the Zodiac Killer, particularly in connection with the 1966 murder of Riverside City College student Cherry Jo Bates. While Bates's murder remains unsolved, some investigators, including San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery and Detective Dave Toschi, believe that she could have been the Zodiac's first victim. Sullivan worked at the RCC campus library, and those who knew him described him as an unsettling figure. He had a reputation for being strange and withdrawn, with an interest in dark poetry. After Bates's murder, Sullivan's behavior became even more suspicious. He vanished for several days, raising questions among his co-workers. Investigators also discovered a disturbing poem carved into a desk in a campus storage room, which eerily described a violent attack similar to what happened to Bates. Beyond his strange behavior, Sullivan bore a striking resemblance to police sketches of the Zodiac Killer. He had a buzz cut, wore glasses, and favored military-style clothing, details that matched witness descriptions. In fact, at the scene of the Lake Berryessa murder, police found a military-style boot print, further tying Sullivan to the case in the minds of some investigators. Despite these clues, Sullivan was never formally questioned as a Zodiac suspect. His mental health deteriorated over the years, and he was institutionalized several times before passing away in Santa Cruz in 1977. While the Zodiac mystery remains unsolved, Ross Sullivan's eerie presence and strange connections to the case continue to fuel speculation. Number 4. Guy Hendrickson. Among the more bizarre claims surrounding the Zodiac Killer case is the accusation made against Guy Hendrickson by none other than his own daughter, Deborah Perez. At a press conference, Perez made a series of strange and unsettling revelations, alleging that her father was the infamous Zodiac Killer and that she had been with him during some of his murderous acts. According to Perez, Hendrickson had deceived her as a child, telling her that the gunshots she heard during the murders were nothing more than firecrackers. She also claimed that she had helped her father in his crimes by stamping the cryptic letters that the Zodiac sent to the newspapers, and she even asserted that she had embroidered the infamous mask worn by the killer during the attacks at Lake Berryessa. Perez's claims grew even more shocking when she alleged that her father had murdered 30 to 40 people, far more than the Zodiac's confirmed victims. She said that Hendrickson apologized for his actions on his deathbed, expressing regret for the lives he had taken. Despite the sensational nature of her accusations, Perez's story has been met with skepticism by many investigators. Still, her claims have fueled speculation about Hendrickson's possible involvement, with some suggesting that the murders may have been a special activity between father and daughter. Whether or not there's any truth to this strange and unsettling story remains one of the Zodiac case's many enduring mysteries. Number 3. Gareth Penn. Gareth Penn is a curious figure in the Zodiac Killer investigation, an intelligent man who became deeply obsessed with the case. Penn originally pointed the finger at his former professor, Michael O'Hare, accusing him of not only being the Zodiac Killer but also being involved in the murder of Joan Webster. However, as his obsession with the case grew, the focus shifted away from O'Hare and instead turned toward Penn himself as a possible Zodiac suspect. Penn was particularly drawn to the Zodiac's use of codes and cryptograms, even developing his own theory known as the radian theory. According to this theory, the Zodiac used mathematical principles, particularly radians, to plot his murders on a map, specifically around Mount Diablo. Penn's ability to make sense of these cryptic details and decipher elements of the Zodiac's Mount Diablo map raised eyebrows. Some found it eerie that he could interpret such complex elements, while others believed he was simply trying to assist the police in cracking the case. Despite his public involvement and deep interest in the case, Penn has continued to be regarded by some as a prime suspect. His intellect, fascination with the Zodiac's codes, and his close involvement in analyzing the case have left many wondering if his interest was more than just that of an investigator. Whether or not Penn is the Zodiac remains unproven, but his unusual connection to the case keeps his name alive in the Zodiac Killer discussions. Number 2. Bruce Davis. Bruce Davis might not be a household name, but his lengthy criminal history has landed him on the list of potential Zodiac Killer suspects. Davis, a former member of the Manson family, was involved in a number of violent crimes, and when he moved to California, both the police and the FBI kept a close watch on him. He was eventually convicted of 2 murders, solidifying his place as a dangerous figure. When investigators questioned Davis about his potential involvement in the Zodiac murders, his response raised some eyebrows. He refused to talk about the Zodiac crimes, stating that he wouldn't discuss anything unless formally charged. This evasiveness led some to believe there could be more to his story. Certain events in Davis's personal life also drew attention from criminal analysts. Specifically, the death of his father coincided with the time of the Zodiac's first attack. Some theorists believe that this traumatic event could have triggered a violent spree, possibly making Davis the elusive Zodiac Killer. While no definitive evidence ties him to the Zodiac murders, Davis's criminal history and the timing of key events in his life keep him in the conversation as a top suspect. Number 1. Rick Marshall. Rick Marshall's name entered the Zodiac Killer investigation after an unsettling encounter with fellow ham radio enthusiasts. When they visited his home, they reported that Marshall displayed some odd behaviors and characteristics that reminded them of the Zodiac Killer. This prompted the police to investigate him as a prime suspect. Several details seemed to point toward Marshall's possible involvement in the Zodiac crimes. He lived just a few miles away from the location of the last confirmed Zodiac murder, raising suspicions about his proximity to the killings. Additionally, Marshall owned a Royal typewriter and a teletype machine, similar to those believed to have been used by the Zodiac for his cryptic letters to newspapers. But despite the seemingly damning evidence, significant pieces of the puzzle didn't fit. Most notably, Marshall's fingerprints didn't match any of the prints recovered from Zodiac crime scenes. Despite the circumstantial evidence, authorities couldn't tie him definitively to the murders. From bizarre theories to compelling evidence, the Zodiac case continues to grip our imaginations decades later. While the true identity of the Zodiac Killer remains unsolved, these suspects have kept us questioning. Could one of them be the mysterious figure behind the infamous crimes? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look into the unsolved and the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more dark tales from Creepshow. Remember, the truth is often stranger than fiction. Until next time, stay safe.